very proud to be here and proud to be with all of you. Let me first send well wishes for my wife Elizabeth, who's doing very well, and she's out campaigning on. I think she's actually in Florida today, but she was in Washington yesterday. But she's doing very well. People are always asking me how her health is. She's doing well. That's the good news. So I'm going to focus on Iraq today because that's the substance of what we're supposed to be focused on in this forum. Very glad to be back here. I'm going to speak for just a very few minutes. I've got a few things that I want to go through on some new policy, but then I want to open the floor and take all your questions on this subject. It's so important for the country. My own view is that the war in Iraq has been an absolute mess, and the person who's most responsible for that is George Bush. I think the men and women who have served this country in Iraq have given extraordinary and patriotic service for their country. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about this more during the course of this forum. But I think America needs to be doing a great deal more than we're doing to take care of the men and women who have served in Iraq when they come home. I think we have a sacred responsibility to them. America needs to be meeting its sacred responsibility. So I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about some new policy, some differences between some of the Democratic candidates about this issue. And let me start with something that Senator Clinton said about a week ago. She said that she would continue to conduct combat missions in Iraq. My view is if you're not ending combat missions and combat operations, you're not ending the war. And let me be very specific about what I would do. I would draw 40 to 50,000 troops out and immediately. And then I would continue to withdraw all of our combat troops so that all of our combat troops were out in about 9 or 10 months. And the only thing that would be left, and this would not be combat troops, the only troops that would be left in Iraq are those that are necessary to guard the embassy, assuming we keep the embassy in Baghdad open, which I think all the candidates are for doing. There has to, unless this is the only embassy in the world that we don't have some protection for, there'd have to be some troops there for that purpose. And then we'd also got to determine if there's humanitarian workers in Iraq, whether it might be necessary to have some troops there for that purpose. But not for purposes of war, and not for purposes of conducting combat operations. The war needs to be brought to an end. And the debate I want to have with whoever the Republican nominee, be it Giuliani, Romney, McCain, whoever it is about whether or not to end the war. I want to be on the podium with them arguing that we must end this war in Iraq and allow them to argue if they want to that we should continue the war. But the debate that Senator Clinton seems to want to have is about how much war we should have. Well, I think we should have none. And that should be our position. It should be the position of the Democratic nominee for president. We should leave it to the Republicans to offer 4 more years of George Bush's mess. Our party has to offer the American people real and serious and substantial change, especially on this issue that's so important to us. And because it's not enough for us to be just a little bit better than the Republicans. We have to give America clear choices. They want to continue the war, I want to end the war. And I want that choice to be clear come next fall when we're debating. Now, my view is our Iraq policy has been a disaster from the beginning. I've said before, I voted for this war, and I was wrong to vote for this war. And I took responsibility for that, very clearly. And I've apologized for having voted for the war and said I was wrong, which is another difference between myself and Senator Clinton. But the American people voted to end this war just this past November of 2006. What they said is they don't want status quo anymore. They want to see real change. It is an outrage that what they've got is status quo. Today's all-volunteer force was designed precisely to avoid a president being able to conduct the war against the will of the American people. By linking military decisions to a force made up of volunteer professional soldiers, wars could not be launched and sustained without the support of the people. The Bush administration is keeping the war in Iraq going despite the overwhelming opposition of America. And they're doing it by performing an end run around our all-volunteer force. They're relying instead, as many of you have seen, on private security forces, private security contractors like Blackwater. The president's relying on contractors precisely because his dangerous mismanagement of the Iraq War has required, and he has chosen to outsource many of our security functions. But he's also relying on these private security contractors out of an ideological doctrine that rewards corporate cronies at the expense of good government and sound policy. About 50,000 private contractors are currently working on security and military missions in Iraq. Their tasks include things like loading weapon systems, operating combat systems, and guarding diplomats. In many instances, security contractors are actually engaged in conflict.